I'm Patricia, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be starting over. For most of my life, I was the one people leaned on, the dependable mother, the loyal wife for 37 years until Henry passed, and the woman who always put family first. My two children, Adam and Sophia, were my pride and joy, though they took different paths in life. Sophia moved across the country for work, while Adam stayed closer to home with his wife and their two children, my precious grandkids Lily and James, now 12 and 9. The modest three-bedroom house I'd called home for over 4 decades held every memory worth keeping. It was where Henry and I had raised our children, where we'd celebrated holidays and birthdays, where I'd nursed Henry through his final days. The mortgage had finally been paid off 5 years ago. One of the proudest moments of my life. That house represented security, the culmination of decades of careful saving and modest living. I'd worked as an elementary school secretary until retiring at 65, while Henry had been a plumber. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we'd been careful with money. After Henry died, I had his small life insurance policy, my modest pension, and the house. It wasn't luxury, but it was enough until it wasn't. The first cracks appeared so subtly I barely noticed them. Adam started visiting more often after his father died. At first, I was grateful for his company and his help with household repairs that had been Henry's domain. There was comfort in having family close by during those first lonely months of widowhood. "Mom, I worry about you in this big house all alone," Adam said during one of his visits, stirring sugar into his coffee the way he had since he was a teenager. "All these stairs, the yard work, the maintenance. It's a lot for someone your age." "I manage just fine," I replied, though truthfully, the house had begun to feel overwhelming. The heating bill had been shocking last winter, and the roof would need replacing soon. Adam nodded thoughtfully. "You know what I've been thinking? Real estate in this area is booming right now. This place could sell for a small fortune." I remember feeling a flutter of unease, but I pushed it away. This was my son after all. The boy I'd nursed through chickenpox and heartbreaks. The man whose college tuition I'd helped pay by taking on extra hours. The father of my grandchildren. What would I do? Where would I go? I asked. His response came with practiced ease. "We could invest the money together, make it grow. You could get a nice little condo, something easier to manage. No stairs, no yard work. And the leftover money could set you up comfortably for years." It wasn't the first time he brought it up, but it was the first time I seriously considered it. Lately, I'd been feeling the weight of my years and the emptiness of the house. The creak of the floorboards at night sometimes made me jump, reminding me of my solitude. "I don't know, Adam. This house is all I have left of your father. Dad would want you to be practical, Mom." He always was. Adam reached across the kitchen table and took my hand. His palm was warm against my papery skin. "Let me help you secure your future. It's what families do." Over the following weeks, Adam brought printouts of condos and retirement communities. He introduced me to his business partner, a slick-talking real estate agent named Parker who spoke quickly about market values and investment opportunities. They painted a picture of me in a bright, modern apartment with a view and security at the front desk. No more worrying about break-ins or maintenance issues. "The market won't stay this hot forever, Mrs. Walker," Parker said during one visit. "It's really the perfect time to sell." Sophia called from Seattle when I mentioned Adam's proposal. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Her voice crackled over the line, thousands of miles away. "That house is paid off. It's your security. Adam says the market is perfect right now," I explained. "And honestly, sweetheart, the house does feel too big these days. Just promise me you'll have your own lawyer look at anything before you sign," Sophia said. "And maybe get an independent assessment of the property value?" I promised her I would, but in the end I didn't. Adam brought the papers and I signed them. Parker listed the house and within 2 weeks we had multiple offers. The final sale price was higher than I'd expected. $320,000 for the home Henry, and I had purchased for just $67,000 all those years ago. "See, Mom? What did I tell you?" Adam beamed as we left the closing. "Now we can put this money to work." I should have noticed the way he said "we." I should have questioned why my name wasn't on all the documents. I should have done 1,000 things differently, but I trusted my son. The plan was for me to stay with Adam and his family temporarily, while we found the perfect condo. The first night in their guest room, I lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of their house, feeling displaced but hopeful. This was just a transition, I told myself. A new chapter. Days turned into weeks. Adam was suddenly busy with investment meetings. Whenever I asked about looking at condos, when I asked for access to the proceeds from the house sale to open my own account, he always had a reason why it wasn't a good time. The money's tied up in short-term investments right now, Mom. We'd lose a lot if we pulled it out early. Just be patient. One morning, I overheard an argument between Adam and his wife, Diane. She was supposed to be here for 2 weeks, not 2 months. Diane hissed, not realizing I was in the hallway. The kids can't even have friends over because she's always in the way. What do you want me to do? Adam snapped back. The Florida property deal is taking longer than expected. Once that closes, we'll figure something out. Florida property deal? This was the first I'd heard of anything in Florida. That afternoon, I confronted Adam in his home office. What's this about Florida? Is that where my money is? He looked startled, then composed himself. It's just one of our investments, Mom. A small vacation rental property. It's going to yield great returns. I never agreed to buy property in Florida, I said, my voice shaking. I want to see the paperwork for all these investments. It's my money, Adam. His expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. Actually, you authorized me to manage the investments. If you start pulling money out now, we'll lose everything. Is that what you want? That night, Diane was coldly polite at dinner, and Adam barely spoke to me. The tension was unbearable. I texted Sophia, asking if I could visit her in Seattle for a while, but she was traveling for work and wouldn't be back for weeks. The next morning, Adam came to my room with a strained smile. Mom, I've been thinking. You're right that you need your own space. I found a place where you can stay while we sort out the investments and find your permanent home. Relief washed over me. That sounds wonderful. When can I see it? Actually, I've already handled everything. We can go there today. 2 hours later, Adam pulled up in front of the Starlight Motel just off the highway at the edge of town. The neon sign had missing letters, and the parking lot was cracked with weeds growing through. A few dubious-looking characters loitered near the ice machine. What is this? I asked, not getting out of the car. It's temporary, Mom, Adam assured me. Just until we close on your condo. A month tops. I've already paid for 4 weeks. You expect me to stay here? Alone? Adam sighed heavily. Mom, Diane and I need our space back. The kids need their playroom. You said yourself you wanted your own place. But this is... I couldn't even find the words. It's clean inside. I checked. And it's all that's available right now with our budget constraints. Budget constraints? With $320,000 from my house. That money is invested, Mom. It's not liquid right now. Please don't make this difficult. Somehow, I found myself standing in a motel room with faded wallpaper and a musty smell, my suitcase and 2 boxes of belongings beside me. Adam had made a hasty exit, promising to call tomorrow. The door closed behind him with a hollow thud. I sat on the edge of the bed, too shocked to cry. The bedspread felt rough under my fingers. Nothing like the handmade quilt that had covered my bed at home. A cockroach scuttled across the bathroom floor, disappearing behind the toilet. That night I barely slept. The walls were thin and I could hear everything. Arguments, television shows, what sounded like drug deals in the parking lot. I wrapped myself in my own sweater for extra warmth, the thin motel blankets providing little comfort. Adam didn't call the next day. Or the day after that. When I tried calling him, the calls went straight to voicemail. I left increasingly desperate messages. Adam, please call me back. I can't stay here. It's not safe. Adam, I need to know what's happening with my money. Please call me. Son, I'm scared. Please just talk to me. After a week of silence, I took a taxi to his house, spending money from my rapidly dwindling checking account. No one answered the door, though I could see Diane's car in the driveway. I knocked until my knuckles hurt, then sat on the porch steps and cried. A neighbor came over looking concerned. Are you all right, ma'am? I'm looking for my son, I managed to say. The woman's expression shifted to one of pity. They left yesterday. Loaded up a moving truck. I thought they'd sold the house. My world collapsed around me. Adam was gone. My money was gone. My home was gone. And I was 68 years old, sitting in front of an empty house with nowhere to go except back to a roach-infested motel room that would only be paid for another 3 weeks. I took the taxi back to the Starlight Motel, my mind numb. Inside my room I finally broke down, sobbing until I had no tears left. What had I done to deserve this? Where had I gone wrong as a mother? How could my own son do this to me? The next morning, with shaking hands, I called Sophia. Mom. Her voice was filled with concern. What's wrong? You sound terrible. The story poured out of me in broken sentences and sobs. Sophia's silence on the other end grew heavier with each revelation. He did what? She finally exploded. That absolute. She cut herself off. Mom, I'm coming to get you. Right now. Today. Pack your things. You can't just drop everything, I protested weakly, though nothing would have made me happier than to see my daughter. Watch me, Sophia said firmly. I'm booking a flight as we speak. I'll be there tonight. Don't go anywhere. True to her word, Sophia arrived that evening, her face a storm cloud as she entered my motel room. She took one look around and swore under her breath. Oh, Mom, she whispered, pulling me into a fierce hug. I'm so sorry. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt safe. But the safety was temporary. Sophia couldn't stay forever, and I had nowhere to go. Let me take you back to Seattle with me, Sophia offered as we sat on the motel bed making plans. Your apartment barely fits you, I reminded her. And what about my doctor appointments, my medications? We'll figure it out, Sophia insisted. The important thing is to get you out of here. But I knew it wasn't a real solution. Sophia shared a one-bedroom apartment with a roommate. There was literally no space for me. And my entire life, what was left of it, was here. My friends, my church, my medical providers. I need to figure this out here, I said finally. But first, we need to find Adam. Sophia's expression darkened. Oh, I plan to find him. And when I do. The next day we went to the police station. The officer who took our statement was sympathetic, but not particularly hopeful. It sounds like you willingly signed over the house and authorized him to invest the money, he said, looking over his reading glasses at me. Without proof that he intentionally defrauded you. This is likely a civil matter, not criminal. He put his own mother in a motel and disappeared. Sophia argued, her voice rising. Being a terrible son isn't a crime, ma'am, the officer replied gently. You'll want to consult with an attorney. As we left the station, my shoulders slumped in defeat. I can't afford an attorney. I have maybe $3,000 in my checking account. And my social security check isn't enough to even rent an apartment in this area. We'll figure something out, Sophia repeated, though I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. That night, unable to sleep in the noisy motel, I went to the small lobby area where they served watery coffee 24 hours a day. An elderly man sat in one of the plastic chairs, reading a dog-eared paperback. He nodded politely as I poured myself a cup. Can't sleep either, he asked. His voice was deep and gentle with a slight southern drawl. No, I admitted. Too much on my mind. I know that feeling. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sometimes it helps to talk to a stranger. No expectations, no history. Just two insomniacs sharing coffee. I hesitated, then sat down. There was something trustworthy about his weathered face and kind eyes. I'm Patricia, I said. George, he replied. Pleasure to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances for both of us. What brings you to the Starlight? I asked, desperate for conversation that wasn't about my problems. Visiting my granddaughter. She's at the university here. He smiled, lines crinkling around his eyes. My apartment building is being treated for bedbugs, so I can't go home just yet. You. I meant to give a vague answer, something polite and non-committal. Instead, the whole story came pouring out, my husband's death, selling the house, Adam's betrayal, the motel, everything. Once I started talking, I couldn't stop. George listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finally ran out of words, he was quiet for a long moment. Patricia, he said finally. I don't usually tell people this right away, but I'm a retired attorney. Family law primarily, but I know my way around elder abuse cases too. I blinked at him, wondering if I'd heard correctly. You're an attorney? Was, he corrected with a small smile. Retired 5 years ago. But I still have my license and plenty of connections. I can't afford legal help, I said automatically. George waved his hand dismissively. Let me at least look at your situation. No charge. Considerate payment for the best conversation I've had in this godforsaken motel. The next morning I introduced George to Sophia. She was skeptical at first. A retired lawyer just happens to be staying at the same cheap motel? It seemed too convenient. But George's knowledge quickly became apparent as he asked detailed questions about the house sale, the documents I'd signed, and Adam's actions afterward. Do you have copies of anything you signed? He asked. I shook my head miserably. Adam kept all the paperwork. Said he'd file it for me. That's all right, George assured me. We can get copies from the county records office for the house sale. And your bank should have records of any transfers. Over the next few days, a picture began to emerge. With George's guidance, we discovered that Adam had indeed transferred the proceeds from my house into an investment account, but it was solely in his name. He had used a power of attorney document I'd signed years ago after Henry's death, which I had forgotten about completely. It had given him access to manage my affairs if I became incapacitated, but he had used it while I was perfectly capable. This is textbook elder financial abuse, George said grimly, looking over the documents we'd gathered. And we have a paper trail to prove it. Can we get her money back? Sophia asked the question I was too afraid to voice. George's expression was cautious but determined. We can certainly try. First step is to revoke that power of attorney immediately. Second step is to file for an emergency injunction to freeze any accounts the money went into. Third, we find Adam. Finding Adam proved surprisingly easy. He hadn't gone far, just 2 towns over. He'd used my money to purchase a luxury condo and a new Mercedes. The Florida investment was indeed real, but it was a vacation property titled solely in his name. When the sheriff served Adam with papers for the emergency hearing, Sophia reported that his face had gone white with shock. He hadn't expected me to fight back. He'd counted on my age, my limited resources, and my shame to keep me quiet. The day of the hearing, I could barely breathe as I entered the courthouse. George had found me a formal outfit at a thrift store. A navy blue skirt suit that reminded me of what I used to wear to parent-teacher conferences when my children were young. The irony wasn't lost on me. Adam sat on the other side of the courtroom with an attorney in an expensive suit. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Diane wasn't with him. When my turn came to testify, my voice shook at first, but grew stronger as I told my story. The judge, a woman about my age, watched Adam's face as I described being abandoned at the motel. And you had no prior knowledge that the proceeds from your home would be invested in property titled solely to your son? The judge asked. Absolutely not, I replied firmly. I believed we were investing it together to buy me a condo and provide for my retirement. Adam's testimony was a web of excuses and half-truths. He claimed I had known about and approved all the investments, that the motel was only temporary while he finalized my retirement cottage purchase, that he'd called me several times but I hadn't answered. The judge wasn't buying it. By the end of the hearing, she had issued a temporary freeze on all assets purchased with my house proceeds and scheduled a full trial for the following month. Outside the courthouse, Sophia hugged me tightly. You were amazing in there, Mom. We've got a long way to go, George cautioned, but it's a good start. As we walked to Sophia's rental car, I saw Adam standing alone by his Mercedes. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away. In that moment I felt no anger, just a profound sadness. That was my child, my son. How had we come to this? The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and painful discoveries. We learned that Adam had a gambling problem that had spiraled out of control in the last year. He'd lost his job 6 months earlier but had hidden it from everyone, including Diane. My house money had been his desperate attempt to solve his financial problems. Diane filed for divorce after discovering the extent of his deception. She contacted me privately, apologizing for her role in what had happened. I knew something wasn't right, she admitted tearfully over the phone. But I never imagined he would steal from you. I thought the money was really being invested for your benefit. Where are my grandchildren? I asked, my heart aching for Lily and James. We're staying with my parents, Diane said. The kids miss you. They don't understand any of this. Please tell them I love them, I said, my voice breaking. None of this is their fault. The full trial never happened. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of criminal charges for elder abuse, Adam agreed to a settlement. All properties purchased with my money would be liquidated, with the proceeds returned to me. He would also face 5 years of probation and mandatory financial counseling. 4 months after that first terrible night at the Starlight Motel, I stood in the living room of my new home, a small but lovely 2-bedroom condo in a secure building for residents 55 and older. It wasn't my old house with its memories and familiar creaks, but it was mine, free and clear. Sophia had extended her leave of absence to help me settle in. George, who had refused any payment for his legal help, had become a dear friend and visited often. We played chess in the condo's community room and shared meals in my new kitchen. You know, George said one evening as we sat on my small balcony watching the sunset, you might consider speaking to other seniors about your experience. Financial elder abuse is far too common, and many victims never recover their losses. I considered his suggestion. The thought of sharing my story publicly made me uncomfortable. There was still so much shame tied to being deceived by my own son. But if it could help someone else, maybe someday, I replied. Right now, I'm still putting my own pieces back together. The hardest piece was Adam. Despite everything, he was still my son. The little boy who had once brought me dandelions and called them flowers. The teenager who had struggled with math but persevered. The young man who had danced with me at his wedding. I hadn't spoken to him since the courthouse. According to Diane, he had moved to a small apartment and was attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings as part of his probation. He was working a retail job and making child support payments on time. One afternoon, while arranging family photos in my new living room, I paused at one of Adam on his college graduation day. His arm was around me, both of us beaming with pride. I traced his face with my fingertip, remembering that day. The hope. The future that had seemed so bright. My phone rang, startling me. I didn't recognize the number. Hello. I answered cautiously. There was a long pause, then a familiar voice. Mom? It's Adam. I'll finish the first part here and wait for your signal to continue with the second part. Mom? It's Adam. My heart seemed to stop for a moment, then race forward. I sank onto the couch, the photo frame still clutched in my hand. Adam, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know where to begin, he said. His voice sounded different, humbled maybe, tired. I've been trying to call for weeks, but I kept hanging up before it rang. I couldn't find the words. I remained silent, unable to help him find those words. The weight of everything that had happened sat between us like a wall. I'm sorry, he finally said. I know that doesn't begin to cover it. What I did was unforgivable. Why? The question had burned inside me for months. I keep asking myself what I did wrong, where I failed as a mother. No, Adam interrupted, his voice cracking. Mom, no. This wasn't about you. You didn't fail. I did. I got in so deep with the gambling and then I lost my job and the debts kept piling up. I convinced myself I was borrowing the money, that I'd pay it back before you ever knew. He paused. I lied to myself before I ever lied to you. I looked down at the photo in my hand, at our smiling faces from a happier time. You let me think I was the problem, that I was a burden. I know, he said softly. I manipulated you. I used your trust against you. I can't undo that. No, I agreed. You can't. We sat in silence for a long moment, the phone line connecting us across a much wider chasm. Diane tells me you're doing well, I said finally, shifting to safer ground. That you're getting help. 90 days clean from gambling, he replied, a hint of pride in his voice. The program is. It's hard, but it's working. I see a therapist twice a week. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I hurt the people I love most. Another silence stretched between us. I miss my grandchildren, I said, my voice catching. They miss you too. Lily asks about you all the time. He hesitated. If you're willing. Diane said she'd be open to bringing them to visit you. Hope flickered in my chest, quickly followed by caution. I'd like that. But Adam, I need time before I can see you. I understand, he said quickly. I don't expect forgiveness, Mom. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Really sorry. And I'm trying to be better. After we hung up, I sat motionless, the photo still in my hands, tears streaming down my face. They weren't entirely tears of sadness or anger anymore. There was relief mixed in, and a complex emotion I couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was the first tentative step toward healing. The next week, Diane brought Lily and James to visit. We spent the afternoon baking cookies in my new kitchen and walking to the park near my condo. James, at 9, was mostly interested in the cookies and playground, but 12-year-old Lily had questions. Grandma, she asked as we sat on a park bench watching James on the swings, why did Dad take your money? Didn't he know it would make you sad? I chose my words carefully. Your dad made some bad choices because he was struggling with a problem called addiction. It made it hard for him to think clearly about how his actions would hurt other people. Lily frowned thoughtfully. Like when James gets so excited about a video game that he forgets to eat dinner? Something like that, I said, smiling despite myself, but much more serious. The important thing is that your dad is getting help now. Mom says we might see him this weekend, Lily said, picking at a loose thread on her sweater. I'm nervous. I put my arm around her shoulders. That's okay. It's normal to have complicated feelings. Just remember that none of this is your fault, and both your parents love you very much. Do you still love Dad? She asked, looking up at me with searching eyes. The question pierced my heart. I do, I answered honestly. I'm very angry with him, and it will take a long time for me to trust him again. But love doesn't just disappear, even when someone hurts you badly. Lily nodded, seeming satisfied with this complex truth. I'm glad you got your new house, Grandma. It's nice. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. The months that followed brought slow but steady change. George and I grew closer, our friendship deepening into something that made my heart feel young again. We never put a label on it, but he was there for dinner most evenings, and I found myself looking forward to his arrival each day. You know, he said one evening as we cleaned up after dinner, I've been thinking about those talks we had about you sharing your story. Oh, I handed him a plate to dry. There's a senior advocacy group that meets at the community center. They're looking for speakers for their financial literacy series next month. I hesitated, my hands stilling in the soapy water. I don't know, George. It's all still so raw. Of course, he said gently. It was just a thought. No pressure. But the idea had planted itself. That night, unable to sleep, I got up and started writing. Just for myself at first, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The words flowed more easily than I expected, pain and resilience pouring onto the page. By morning, I had the rough outline of my story. I read it over, seeing my experience with new clarity. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about strength I hadn't known I possessed. About starting over at 68. About finding unexpected allies and rebuilding a life I thought was over. When I called the senior center the next day to inquire about the speaking opportunity, it felt like taking another step toward reclaiming my narrative. My first presentation was terrifying. I stood before a room of about 30 seniors, my hands trembling as I held my notes. But as I began to speak, sharing the painful details of how I'd been manipulated and abandoned, I saw recognition in many faces. Heads nodded. A few people wiped away tears. During the question period afterward, a woman about my age stood up. How did you find the courage to fight back? She asked. I'm in a similar situation with my daughter, but I'm too ashamed to tell anyone, let alone go to court. The shame doesn't belong to you, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. It belongs to those who would take advantage of your trust. And you find courage one small step at a time, with the help of others who believe in you. After the presentation, several people came up to share their own stories or seek advice. I couldn't offer legal counsel like George could, but I could listen. I could validate their experiences. I could assure them they weren't alone. As George drove me home, he squeezed my hand. You were magnificent, he said. Do you realize how many lives you touched today? I just told my story, I demurred. Sometimes that's the most powerful thing we can do. The senior center asked me to return the following month. Then a church group requested a similar talk. Then a local newspaper did a feature on elder financial abuse, with my story as the centerpiece. Each time I spoke, the shame diminished a little more, replaced by purpose. I started volunteering at a legal aid clinic that George connected me with, helping other seniors navigate the complex systems that had once overwhelmed me. My background as a school secretary had given me organizational skills that proved surprisingly valuable in helping people gather documentation and keep track of their cases. 6 months after that first phone call, Adam asked if we could meet. We chose a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between my condo and his apartment. I arrived early, my stomach in knots, and chose a table near the back. When Adam walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost weight, and there was a gravity to him that hadn't been there before. Our eyes met, and he hesitated before approaching. "Mom," he said, his voice thick. I didn't stand to embrace him. I wasn't ready for that. But I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down, Adam." He did, his movements stiff and uncertain. For a long moment we just looked at each other, measuring the changes that had taken place. "You look well," he said finally. "I've been following your work with the senior advocacy groups. It's really amazing what you're doing." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by the genuine pride in his voice. "I've been thinking a lot about why I did what I did," Adam continued, staring into his coffee cup. "The gambling was part of it, but there was something deeper. I think I've always resented Dad for not leaving us better off, for working so hard but having so little to show for it." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "And then I resented you for being content with what we had, for not wanting more." I considered his words, remembering how Adam had always chafed against our modest lifestyle, how even as a teenager he'd been drawn to friends with wealthier families and more material possessions. "Your father and I were rich in ways that mattered," I said quietly. "We had enough. We had each other. We had you and Sophia." "I know that now," Adam said, a tear slipping down his cheek. "But it took losing everything to understand it." We talked for nearly 2 hours, peeling back layers of hurt and misunderstanding. It wasn't easy. There were moments of anger, of grief, of painful honesty. But underneath it all, I felt something shift between us, not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but perhaps the groundwork for it. As we were preparing to leave, Adam reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you," he said, sliding it across the table. "It's not much, but it's a start." Inside was a check for $1,200 and a handwritten note. "Restitution payment number 1. There will be more. I promise." I looked up at him, questioning. "I'm putting aside a percentage of every paycheck," he explained. "It will take years, but I'm going to pay back every cent I took from you, with interest." I tucked the envelope into my purse, not sure how to respond. The money wasn't really the point anymore. I had enough now to live comfortably, but I recognized the gesture for what it was. A tangible commitment to making amends. "Thank you," I said simply. As we walked to our cars, Adam asked hesitantly, "Do you think someday you might be able to forgive me?" I looked at my son, flawed, broken, but trying so hard to rebuild himself and repair the damage he'd caused. "I'm working on it," I answered honestly. "It's a process, Adam, just like your recovery." He nodded, accepting this partial answer. "Could I call you again sometime?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." Over the next year, our relationship gradually found a new shape. It wasn't the same as before, how could it be? But slowly, carefully, we built something different. Something with clearer boundaries and more honest communication. Adam continued his recovery program and his therapy. He made monthly restitution payments without fail. He rebuilt his relationship with his children, now with supervised visitation that eventually expanded to occasional overnight stays. Diane and he remained divorced, but they found a way to co-parent respectfully. Sophia visited as often as she could, though her demanding job limited her trips. She remained wary of Adam, protective of me in a way that sometimes created tension between us. But even that began to ease as she saw the changes in her brother, and my cautious acceptance of his efforts. My work with senior advocacy expanded. What had begun as sharing my personal story evolved into a more formal role educating seniors about financial exploitation and connecting them with resources. The local area agency on aging hired me part-time to conduct workshops throughout the county. George was by my side through it all, his steadfast support never wavering. We still never put a label on our relationship, but on my 70th birthday, he presented me with a delicate silver ring. "It's not an engagement ring," he clarified as I opened the box. "Unless you want it to be. It's a promise that whatever comes next, we'll face it together." I slipped the ring onto my finger, marveling at how life could surprise you at any age. "Together sounds perfect," I said, leaning in to kiss him. That evening, surrounded by Sophia, Diane, the grandchildren, and a few close friends I'd made at my new condo complex, I blew out the candles on my birthday cake and made a wish, not for anything specific, but for the strength to continue embracing this unexpected chapter of my life. Adam arrived late, hovering uncertainly at the edge of the gathering until I beckoned him over. He handed me a small gift bag. "Happy birthday, Mom." Inside was a framed photograph I hadn't seen in years. One of our entire family at the beach when Adam and Sophia were children. Henry and I sat on a blanket, sunburned and laughing, while the kids built a sandcastle at our feet. "I found it when I was going through some old boxes," Adam explained. "I thought you might want it." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "It's perfect." Later, as the party wound down and people began to leave, Adam helped me clean up the kitchen. "You seem happy, Mom," he observed as he dried a serving platter. I considered this. I am, I realized. Not in spite of what happened, but because of it in some ways. I discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. Adam nodded thoughtfully. "I think about that night a lot, when I dropped you at that motel. How scared and alone you must have felt. How I drove away knowing exactly what I was doing. It was my lowest point," I acknowledged. "I felt like my life was over. And now," I looked around my condo, at the life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. At George chatting with Sophia in the living room. At the stack of workshop materials for next week's presentation. At the silver ring catching the light on my finger. "Now I know better," I said. "Endings are just beginnings in disguise." 2 years to the day after I'd been abandoned at the Starlight Motel, I stood before an audience of over 200 people at a statewide conference on elder abuse prevention. My story had become something of a touchstone in advocacy circles, not just for the betrayal and legal battle, but for what came after. Recovery from financial exploitation isn't just about recouping losses, I told the room. It's about reclaiming your sense of agency, your voice, your right to trust again, wisely but openly. As I spoke, I spotted George in the audience, beaming with pride. Beside him sat Adam, who had asked permission to attend. Their presence, these two men who represented such different facets of my journey, felt symbolic somehow. When my son took advantage of my trust, he didn't just take my money and my home, I continued. He took my sense of place in the world, my confidence that I mattered, my belief that a lifetime of love and sacrifice would be honored. I paused, looking directly at Adam, who met my gaze steadily despite the tears streaming down his face. The hardest lesson I've learned is that forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the past. It means creating a new future where the past no longer controls you. I took a deep breath. I'm still learning this lesson every day. We all are. After the standing ovation, after the handshakes and business cards exchanged, after the conference organizers had thanked me profusely, I found myself standing between George and Adam in the hotel lobby. "That was quite something, Patricia," George said, his arm around my shoulders. "You never ceased to amaze me." Adam nodded in agreement. "You were incredible, Mom. I'm so proud to be your son, even if I don't deserve to be." I looked at him, really looked at him. The son who had betrayed me so completely. The man who had spent 2 years working tirelessly to make amends. The father who was gradually becoming someone his children could trust again. In that moment I felt something settle in my heart. A peace that had been jagged and painful for so long, finally finding its new place. "Thank you both for being here today," I said. "It means more than you know." Later that night, back in my condo, I stood on my small balcony looking at the stars. The same stars that had shone down on me that first terrible night at the motel, when I'd felt so utterly alone and discarded. I thought about the woman I'd been then, broken, bewildered, shrinking from the harsh reality of betrayal. And I compared her to the woman I was now, standing tall, speaking out, helping others find their way through similar darkness. The transformation still astonished me. How had such a devastating breakdown of trust led to such unexpected growth? How had the worst thing that ever happened to me also, in some strange way, become a catalyst for the most meaningful chapter of my life? There were no simple answers, of course. Just as there was no simple resolution to the complicated relationship with my son. Some days I still felt the sting of his betrayal sharply. Other days I could see beyond it to the broken man who had finally faced his demons. Forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't a single moment of grace but a continual choice. A practice. A path walked one day at a time. Inside, the phone rang. I smiled, knowing it would be George, calling as he did every night before bed. "Just checking in," he would say, as if we hadn't parted just hours ago. Making sure my favorite advocate is resting her voice after that magnificent speech. And I would tell him about the stars, and the thoughts they had stirred, and the peace I was gradually finding. He would listen, as he always did, with that remarkable capacity to hold space for whatever I needed to express. Before going to sleep, I would write in the journal I'd kept since that first night of insomnia at the Starlight. The entry would be brief but meaningful. Another marker on this journey of reclamation. Today I spoke my truth. I stood between my past and my future, and for the first time, I felt truly at home in the present. At 70 years old, with a broken heart mended in golden seams like precious kintsugi pottery, I had found a voice I never knew I had. I had discovered strength in vulnerability, purpose in pain, and community where I least expected it. More than anything, I had learned that it's never too late to begin again. That losses, even devastating ones, can become doorways to unimagined gifts. That the story of our lives is constantly being written and rewritten, with each day offering a new page, a fresh chance, another beginning. That night, as I drifted off to sleep in the safety of my own home, truly my own now in a way my old house had never quite been, I felt a deep gratitude for this complicated, painful, beautiful journey. For the depths it had forced me to plumb and the heights it had allowed me to reach. The betrayal had broken me open. But in that breaking, something essential had been released, a version of myself I might never have discovered otherwise. A woman who stood firmly in her power, who spoke truth to injustice, who helped others find their way back from darkness. A woman who, against all odds and expectations, had found her voice at last.